I should have known something was off about the place the minute I walked in, but I needed the job, and the Davis Creek Inn wasn't just hiring, it was desperate. The inn had been planted on the windswept cliffs of Davis Creek like a forgotten tombstone, all grimy windows and peeling white paint that could have used a good decade of care. The guts of the lobby bore the musky scent of old wood and mothballs, sort of comforting if you grew up around antique shops like I did. But there was something else too, a faint hint of ozone, like after a thunderstorm. That place knocked the nostalgia right out of the air. The owner, Mrs. Gretsch, was a gaunt woman with hair as tightly wound as her personality. Her eyes were sharp, picking me apart as I approached the reception desk, my resume trembling slightly in my hand despite my attempt to appear composed. Ever worked at an inn before? Her voice was like gravel, not unfriendly, just worn and blunt. No, mostly retail and a short stint at a diner. You know, customer service stuff, I said, trying to sound upbeat. She nodded slowly, eyes fixed on my resume as if she could glean dark secrets from it. There was no computer at her desk, just a massive ledger that looked older than me. She took down my details in it, her handwriting a cramped scrawl. 3 rules here at Davis Creek Inn, she announced suddenly, snapping the ledger shut. Rule 1, never leave the lobby's back door open after sunset. Bugs get in otherwise. Rule 2, don't go into the room 237, not for cleaning, not for a dare, no reason. It's under renovation. Rule 3, the guests should not be out past midnight. If you see anyone wandering, guide them back to their rooms. Any questions? I almost laughed. Surely the guest curfew was a joke. But the stern set of Mrs. Gretsch's lips quelled the giggle in my throat. No, ma'am. Start tomorrow, 3 p.m. sharp. Don't be late, she concluded, dismissing me with a flick of her wrist. That night, I lay in bed replaying her rules in my mind, especially the one about room 237. Under renovation or something else. My curiosity was piqued, but it was probably just mold or a collapsing ceiling. I told myself anything mundane to shake the eerie feeling. My first shift started with a benign weirdness. The inn felt different in daylight, less haunting, but still lonely, wearing its age like a badge. Mrs. Gretsch gave me a brief tour, pointedly skipping room 237. The more mundane tasks of tidying up and checking in a sparse few guests filled the afternoon. The sun began to set, and I remembered the first rule. I double-checked the back door. Locked. Something small but crucial, yet the importance Mrs. Gretsch placed on it felt disproportionate until I heard it. That faint, unsettlingly crisp sound like static from the back room, just as the last sliver of sun disappeared. I hesitated, my hand on the lock. Mrs. Gretsch hadn't said anything about not going into the back room. Pushing the door open, the static grew louder, almost commanding. The room was cluttered, brooms and old newspapers stacked haphazardly, but nothing that could make that sound. Then I saw it, a pale blue glow emanating from under the door to the outside. Heart-pounding, I approached, irrational fear gripping me with each step. I should turn back, I thought. I reached for the doorknob, the blue light flickering like breath, and as my hand touched the cold metal, the static stopped abruptly. Silence, a deep, suffocating silence fell, and I yanked my hand back as if burned. Behind me, the unmistakable sound of footsteps nearing stopped me cold. No one was scheduled for a check-in this late. The light from my phone screen seemed invasive as I flicked it on, casting long shadows down the hallway. The footsteps grew louder, closer, too heavy for someone merely wandering. And there, at the far end of the corridor, just before it turned out of sight, was that movement. No, just shadows. Right. The possibility of it being just shadows did little to steady the drumbeat panic in my chest. The flickering hall light, with each pass, seemed to mock my fright, offering brief glimpses of safety before plunging me back into doubt. I swallowed, the the sound loud in the quiet, and edged forward, my fingers brushing against the cool wall for guidance. Perhaps, if I reached the bend in the corridor, illumination might grant clarity, might dispel the illusion of movement. With each step, I told myself it was just the building settling, just the wind, just my own heightened senses playing the trickster. This building, old as it was, had a reputation for creaks and groans, for the temperature changes that made you suddenly feel as if someone had walked over your grave. But as I neared the curve in the corridor, the air seemed to constrict around me. The slight odor of damp wallpaper mixed with something faintly metallic, blood. No, iron, perhaps, from the ancient pipes within the walls. Breathing shallowly, I reached the corner and paused, straining my ears for any sound above my own ragged breaths. It came then, a soft scrape, like shoes dragging reluctantly across the threadbare carpet. It was from around the bend, out of sight but undeniably real. The shadows hadn't been playing. Something or someone was there. I should have turned back, should have retreated to the safety of the lit portion of the hall, to the part of the building I knew was inhabited. But the uncertainty, the need to know, pushed me forward. I leaned against the wall, peering around the corner with a caution born of every horror story protagonist's first bad decision. The corridor stretched on, statuesque in its dilapidation, the wallpaper peeling like dead skin. And there, further down, nearly at the other end, was a figure. It was hunched, indistinct, stationary. Was it watching me? No, it seemed engaged in something, some silent, meticulous task that had it absorbed completely. The feeble light did not reach it fully, casting it in partial shadow, making it all the more eerie, all the more difficult to define. I stepped back behind the sanctuary of the wall and took a deep, quavering breath. Rational thoughts spun through my mind. It could be a homeless person seeking shelter, a maintenance worker perhaps. But deeper, primal instincts screamed at me to flee. Yet they warred against a sick, magnetic pull toward the figure, the unfolding scene. I edged out again, just a glimpse, I promised myself. The figure had moved. It was closer, not by much but noticeably nearer, and it was unmistakably facing my direction now. Though its face was obscured by darkness or by design, I couldn't tell which. My heart seized in my chest, my feet rooted to the spot as I tried to discern features, any clue as to its intentions or identity. That's when the lights flickered again, this time staying dark a beat too long, and when they stuttered back to life, the figure was gone. Not retreated or hidden, simply gone as if it had never been. The hallway was empty, the silence complete but for the distant, mocking drip of a leaky faucet. Panic, raw and fierce, gripped me. I choked back a scream, my instincts now screaming that I was not, in fact, alone. My eyes darted, seeking shadows within shadows, uncertainties in every corner. I should have left then, should have trusted the fear. But a sound pulled me forward, a whisper, not of words but of movement, a mere suggestion that something was amiss. Drawn almost against my will, I moved back to the corner, peering into the darkness where the figure had been, straining into the impenetrable dark to make sense of the movements that seemed half-imagined. Then, clear and near enough to send ice flooding through my veins, a soft, moist slithering sound, like wet flesh dragging across the carpet. I squinted, my throat locked, and in the inconsistent dance of shadow and light, caught the briefest glimpse of something inexplicable: limbs. Too many, too thin, unfurling like the legs of a spider from an unseen torso, then retracting swiftly into the gloom. The light flickered again, and in the brief darkness I turned and ran, the image imprinted on my eyelids, the horror of not knowing what it was or what it wanted driving a primal flight. Behind me, the corridor remained silent, the encounter unverified but deeply felt, a terror now lodged inside me like a second spine. My breath ragged, pounding in my ears, eclipsed only by the staccato of my shoes slapping the linoleum. I dared not look back. The building seemed to stretch impossibly long before me. Each door I passed, identical, tempting with promises of hiding spots, sudden and dangerous. But the image of what I'd seen, or thought I had seen, clawed at my sanity, urging me forward, away from any dark crevice it might inhabit. The flickering fluorescent tubes overhead cast an erratic, stuttering glow, shadows dancing like macabre puppets along the sterile white walls. Theoretically, these corridors teemed with life during the day, laughter, conversation, the mundane rattling of the living. But now, under the cloak of night, they twisted into a labyrinthine crypt, echoing only my own terror-stricken escapade. At the end of the corridor, I glimpsed an exit sign, glowing a reassuring green. Hope surged, propelling me faster. But just as relief began to uncoil the tight dread within me, a sound scuttled through the silence behind me, a whispery drag that froze my marrow. It was soft, almost curious, like fingertips brushing across the wall. I swallowed, tasted metal, my throat constricting with the certainty that whatever had been in that room had not stayed put. Hesitation clawed at me. The primal parts of my brain screamed to run, to not look back. Yet the human part, the eternally damned curious part, skidded to a halt. My breath came in sharp gasps, puffing out invisible clouds in the chill air as I turned. There was nothing but the empty hallway. The door stood. Closed, the lights continued their capricious flicker, and the exit sign beckoned. A whiff of something acrid, like burnt wiring, stung my nostrils, an unseen burn within the walls. Or inside me, perhaps. My mind raced, piecing together a plausible enough reality to stave off impending madness. I started walking backwards toward the exit, unable to tear my eyes from the stretch of corridor I'd just run. Every shadow seemed poised to coalesce into that form again, every slight noise a harbinger of its approach. And then, precisely as I took a step too far, my back collided with something solid, something that hadn't been in my panicked peripheral view a second ago. Spinning around, my heart hurled itself against the cage of my ribs, eyes wide before the reality settled. It was just a janitor's cart, abandoned in haste, perhaps by someone more attuned to the night's wrongness than I. Relief flooded me briefly, before the earlier dread reasserted itself, cold and gnawing. Choosing a longer but potentially safer route, I detoured through adjoining corridors, the tang of antiseptic strong in the stagnant air. Here and there, doors bore placards of staff names, accolades, mundane reminders of the world outside this nocturnal terror. The edge of panic began to dull as I moved, the survival part of my brain reminding me of the improbability of the night's events. The logical cells stitching a coat of denial to armor myself with. It was a trick of the light, a brief nightmare awake, I reassured myself. Yet, every echo in the desolate halls felt like a following step, every flicker of light a blink to clear horrific visions. Finally reaching the staff lounge, I crashed through the door, panting, disturbing the stale calm of untouched coffee cups and scattered magazines. Leaning against the door, I slid to the ground, my eyes squeezing shut momentarily. Silence enveloped me, safe and enclosing. But as my breathing steadied, another sound pricked my ears, a soft, familiar, dragging sound, closer now than ever before. My eyes snapped open to the horror of the semi-dark room, the unexpected realization that solitude was perhaps the most dangerous illusion of all. The last flickers of light shuddered, then died, leaving me cloaked in stifling darkness, with only the sound of dragging creeping ever closer. The silence that followed the final gasp of light seemed thick, tangible, as though the darkness itself could be sliced and weighed. The dragging sound approached, slow and relentless, each pull and thud setting my heart to match its eerie cadence. Clawing against the panic rising in my throat, I pressed my back against the clammy wall, praying for invisibility. Under the veil of black, my senses sharpened with cruel clarity. The air tasted stale, tinged with the must of decay, mildew perhaps, or something far less benign. My eyelids fluttered in futile attempts to adjust to the impenetrable dark, and I realized the futility of relying on sight. My other senses would have to suffice. I strained to hear over my ragged breaths, the drag thud growing louder, nearer. My mind raced. The list of possible intruders was macabre but unlikely. A wounded animal, a desperate human, or worse. Whatever worse could mean in the depths of such a night. The walls felt confining, a shrinking cage. I should move, I thought, but the fear of attracting attention kept me plastered against the cold wall. I counted the beats of my heart, trying to ground my racing mind when the sound abruptly stopped. The silence was suffocating, worse than the sound of approach. My breath hitched at a soft scraping, like nails on wood, just meters away. I dared not move, dared not even breathe, though my lungs screamed for air. Then a whisper, or perhaps the echo of a whisper. Why hide? The voice was neither loud nor particularly menacing, but it cut through the silence with surgical precision. Human, definitely human, yet tinged with something hollow, as if echoed from an empty well. The voice, now a near certainty that I was not alone, churned my stomach. Mocking shadows began to dance beneath my eyelids, each one darker and more sinister than the last. I pressed my hands to my ears, a childish shield against the timbre of that voice. "Go away," I managed, the words slicing the thick silence like a weak beam of light. Silence returned, oppressive and dense. Minutes or hours could have passed. Time had abandoned me as completely as the light. Without warning, a touch, cold, decidedly real, fingertips brushing against my ankle. A scream clawed its way up my throat, but manifested only as a choked gasp. I recoiled, stumbling sideways against something solid, unforgiving. The floorboards creaked ominously under the sudden shift of weight, betraying my position. The touch came again, more insistent. A hand, or something like it, cold and damp, gripped my ankle. My fear metamorphosed abruptly into action. I kicked hard my foot, connecting with what felt unnervingly like flesh. The grip loosened, but did not release. Sobbing quietly, I kicked again, desperation lending strength. This time, the hold broke, and I scrambled noiselessly on all fours away from the spot. My hands found the outline of a door. With trembling fingers, I felt for the knob, turned it with painstaking silence, and edged inside what I hoped was safety, a closet, perhaps. I pulled the door close, heart thumping a frantic code of terror. Here in this new darkness, I held my breath, listening. After a breathless, tense moment, the dragging sound resumed, moving away, fading but not vanishing. The reprieve, however fleeting, allowed me to gather my scattered thoughts. I needed a plan, a weapon, anything. As I sat contemplating my grim arsenal, belts for binding, shoes for throwing, sharp edges of broken possessions, a chilling thought pressed against the forefront of my mind. The voice had known I was there, had asked why I hid. It wasn't searching blindly, it was playing. The game, it seemed, was far from over. But neither was I, not yet. The real question hung in the air, colder than any ghostly touch. Why hide, indeed? Was it smarter to wait or to confront? The thought hovered in the darkness like a specter, waiting for my next move.